Welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. On Mondays, you will receive direct therapeutic support from a licensed therapist or professional connected to the mental health field. They will provide therapeutic and educational resources to help you have a healthier relationship with your family members. On Wednesdays, you will receive direct tips and resources to help you get through the stuck places that prevent many people from having the relationships with their families and significant others that they desire. On Fridays, we want you to visit our blog, which can be found at www.blackmftmatters.com, which holds additional resources and action steps that you can begin implementing immediately to improve your relationships. This is necessary because we love that you are listening, but we want you to take action too. While you are there, please grab our A to Z Relationship Bootcamp and be provided with the skills you need to immediately communicate better within your relationships. Please note that while the therapists on podcasts are therapists, they do not serve as your therapist unless you have signed a confidential agreement with them confirming that relationship. Thank you in advance for listening, and we hope you are inspired. All right, it's time for the show. Here is your host, Dr. Connie Omari.
Hey, and welcome to the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Today's guest is Dr. Ebony White. Hi, Dr. Ebony.
Hi, Dr. Connie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am well.
Good. Well, let's take a moment to introduce you to our audience today. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
All right. Dr. Ebony is a licensed professional counselor in New Jersey and professor at Drexel University. She is also the executive director of the Center for Mastering and Refining Children's Unique Skills, also known as Marcus, which is a nonprofit organization where she is expanding focus on developing developmental pathways for at-promise adolescents in Trenton, New Jersey, through counseling, mentoring, and tutoring. Why don't you tell me a little bit more about that? Because I don't want to butcher the title. Is At Promise like the name of the company?
No. So oftentimes when we talk about kids of color, particularly Black kids, we use the term at risk.
Oh,
and so instead of using at risk, I use at promise.
I love that. Awesome. Because I was tempted to say at risk, but I wanted to see clarifications on it. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, all right. So she also focuses primarily on issues that impact the relationships and functioning of African Americans, primarily women and teens. She also provides multicultural and mental health training for law enforcement, religious leaders, educators, and community members. Dr. Ebony's research interest broadly focuses on advocacy and social justice within the African American community. Wow. Thank you, Dr. Ebony, for your work.
Thank you. I mean, essentially everything Black is what I do in regards to the mental health realm. Yes.
That is good. That is awesome. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit more about why you started doing this type of work?
You know, it's interesting. I was one of those people. Actually, let me back up a little bit. My mom is a certified social worker.
Okay.
And so she lives that identity. And I remember being a kid, and I didn't realize how revolutionary this was at the time. Mm-hmm. But in the late 80s, early 90s, my mom used to volunteer at an HIV/AIDS clinic. Mm-hmm. And, that was during the time when they really didn't know how it was contracted or how to, all of those things. But she was there doing the work. She would stand on the corner and pass out clean syringes and condoms.
Oh, wow.
And growing up in the church, she got some backlash for doing those things. But watching my mother have such a heart for the community, I definitely think it kind of just descended, or I inherited that. I inherited that from her. But more importantly, growing up in the community in which I work, I have firsthand knowledge and experience of what it's like to live below the poverty line, what it's like to see yellow tape when you're walking to and from school, what it's like to be in classes that are too full with not enough resources. And so it was just really important for me to do that type of work.
That's amazing. Well, can I assume that might be why you refer to Black children as at promise as opposed to at risk?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Is that like your type of thing, or are other people doing this?
No, other people are doing it too. The first time I heard it, I've done some training. in my bio, you said I do multicultural trainings for educators as well. And I was connected to this organization with my good friend, Dr. Johnny Cruz Craig, with the Delta Teacher Advocacy Campaign.
Oh, that's nice.
And several years ago, I want to say probably like 2014, probably 2014, I heard her using the term at promise. And I said, you know what? I'm going to adopt that. And she said, yeah, absolutely. You know, we're tired of people looking at our babies through this pathological lens.
That makes so much sense. Yeah.
So,
wow. Thank you for that. Thank you. Well, that's amazing. What's one thing? So today we're going to talk a little bit about coping skills. And I think that's great. And before we go into it, just kind of what is a coping skill?
Yeah. And you know, it's really, it is exactly what it sounds like. It's a strategy, something you have in your personal toolbox that helps you to manage the day-to-day. And so whether that is incidents or events that happen, that could be anything as small as somebody irritating you at work to dealing with a heavy loss and grief. But just so something that you use so that you're able to function at your best level.
Very good. I like that. And I think it's important because sometimes, you know, especially like in our community, we see certain behaviors and certain things that are modeled after. So if your dad was like an explosive person, you tend to think that that's just kind of how it is. So how, you know, I guess what I'm hearing you say is that coping skills is like a way that you can learn how to behave and not necessarily behave based off of maybe some things that you witnessed. Is that correct?
You know, it's interesting. I don't know. To some extent, yes, but it's important to know that there are things such as healthy coping skills and unhealthy coping skills.
Oh,
right?
That's a good one. Yeah. Because I guess being explosive is a coping skill.
Exactly. Or it's a way of expressing, right? And so we've seen, you know, people turn to substances as an unhealthy coping skill. And so they recognize that they're dealing with something they need to be able to manage, but they may not choose the healthiest path to manage it. And so it's, you know, yes, we do learn from our environment. We learn from the people around us. Sometimes we learn what to do. We learn what not to do. But it's important that the coping skills that we employ, or I encourage folks to employ coping skills that don't have those negative consequences attached to them.
Very good. Very good. So what's one thing you wish Black families knew about healthy coping skills?
That it is not elusive to them. And I'm trying to find a different term. You know, for a long time, as you know, in our community, mental health or even counseling or having a therapist was seen more of as an elitist thing or even as a white thing, right? And so when we're talking about these topics, it's important to know that, no, we have access to being able to cope just like anybody else, right? And so I wish that Black families knew that they are already doing some things that they could name that's healthy coping, that even though it's not maybe validated by white folks or validated in the mainstream, it's ways that we've learned how to cope just within our communities. And then I also wish that they realized that resilience is not necessarily always a good thing.
Oh, tell me more.
In regards to the resilience piece?
Yes. Why is resilience not good?
Right. And so resilience, you know, in many respects, like it's good because it means that we survive and that we keep going and that we go through. But the problem with taking on a resilience identity is that, you know, particularly Black women, is that then we don't get a chance to be weak and to be vulnerable and to need help. And so if we're seen as resilient, then we're overlooked for support. We're not getting our needs met. And so having this whole, you know, I'm strong, I can get through it. If my mom did it, I can do it, right? That whole push, it really interferes with us being able to get our needs met.
Oh, wow. I love that strong Black woman thing. The gift and a curse at the same time.
At the same time.
What type of healthy coping skills can we give to strong Black women?
I don't even think we have to give it to them. We already have them, right? And so something that hasn't been highlighted enough in our communities is what Black people, Black women, Black people have done all the time. You know, it's a misconception that we don't talk and communicate about our feelings. Because if we go to, you know, definitely pre-pandemic, but now everything is opening up. But if you go to any salon and barbershop, in the Black community, there's a lot of vulnerability, there's a lot of openness, and a lot of communication happening, right? And that's coping skills, right? People go to church, they go to church and they hear a sermon and all that kind of stuff, but people also go to the church to stay connected, and they form bonds and friendships, right? They engage in prayer, and not just church, you know, it could be a mosque or, you know, whatever people's religions, like it's this connection. And so faith is a huge coping skill, right? Being able to believe that something greater than me has my back. And I can, if I can't go anywhere else, I can go there. And so that's a great coping skill. And so being able to look within your community and say, you know what, I feel better when I am around my auntie now. I feel better when I'm, you know, at the salon. I feel better when I'm at church. And so if those things help you to feel better, those are coping skills. My favorite place to be when I was a child is sitting between one of my grandma's legs. Actually, greased and scratched my scalp and hair.
Listen. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And at the end, you know, the leftover grease on her hands, she put on your face and you be shining.
I remember that. Yes. Nice.
But it was relaxing, and it brought comfort, right? And whatever stress I had throughout the day as a child or whatever, I was at peace, in that space.
I love that so much. Well, I feel like just for us to thoroughly talk about the healthy coping skills, we need to talk about the unhealthy ones, because a lot of times people are doing things and they don't know that it's not okay because it's all that they've seen. So what do you want Black families to know about unhealthy coping skills?
Yeah, so isolation, that's something that is that can certainly be, well, that is certainly an unhealthy coping skill, particularly because specifically Black people, we thrive. It's okay. Black people, we thrive in community. Right? We are our best when we are supported, when we are connected. And when we isolate, what we're doing is we are separating the connection. We are disconnecting, right? And I do a lot of addictions work as well. And there are a lot of people in addictions field who say that the opposite of addiction isn't like healthy or recovery. The opposite of addiction is connection. Right. And so if we are isolating, what we're doing is we're stopping ourselves from being able to benefit from the connections that we have. Another thing about isolation is, you know, things that I used to hear the old folks say when I was coming up is, you know, an idle mind is a devil's playground. Right? When you're isolated, you are stuck in your own head and your own thoughts, and you have nobody to help you challenge those or to give you a counter narrative than the one that you're creating in your own mind. And that can be really unhealthy. So isolating is an unhealthy coping skill. I already talked about relying on substances. Now I'm, you know, if I can keep it real and transparent on this podcast, I like a glass of wine just like anybody.
I should have had you bring a glass because I do too.
Yes, just like I like a glass of wine. But if you feel like you're turning to it to get through something, right? Like I can't get through this day without this substance, then that is an unhealthy coping skill, right? Some people use sex. It's an unhealthy coping skill. We know that sex has its place in relationship, right? But if you're using it to numb, if you're using it to distract, right? Then that is an unhealthy coping skill. And then also
using it to, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is sensitive for me because people will use it to stay in relationships that they shouldn't be in. That's unhealthy as well, correct?
It is not only is it unhealthy, it's toxic. It is damaging to our identity, self-esteem, self-worth. And you know, if I could, you know, to step into my Baptist shoes for a second, you're probably blocking your blessings.
Hello. That part. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
But also, you know, I do want to honor that sex is a way to connect. And so sometimes people aren't even using it maliciously, but when they realize that there's no connection in a relationship in other ways, they're like, at least we have this. We can connect here, but it's not a genuine sense of connection, because then if you don't have the other places where you're connected, then it's just sex.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you think, where do you think Black families struggle the most as it relates to expressing themselves using healthy coping skills? What is their number one like difficulty?
You know, I am very of the mind that we have to look at the whole system and the context, right? I think Black families' biggest difficulty is that we've had to figure out how to survive and work towards thriving in a system that was designed to kill us.
Yes.
Right?
It didn't even have us in mind.
It didn't even, well, they had us in mind in a very specific capacity.
Yes, for what we could do for them.
Exactly. Yeah. Not as fully whole human beings. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so when you put, when first of all, when you steal people and bring them here and never allow them space to be themselves and have their own language and have their own connections, and you're saying, listen, we put you here, you have to survive in our system. Mm-hmm. Even though the whole time we're trying to kill you, then it creates unhealthy patterns of communication, unhealthy patterns of power, unhealthy patterns of, all of.
Can you give us one example?
Yeah, absolutely. My theoretical orientation is reality therapy. Mm-hmm. And one thing that William Glasser talks about is that he puts the 5 needs in evenly instead of how Maslow has them. And the needs are different with Glasser, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the 5 needs in Glasser's model is power. And so it's important to know that power is not something negative to want. But the problem is that white people have bastardized power. And so we think we've been shown that power means dominance, that power means abuse, that power, means all of these things that it doesn't mean, right? That we don't realize that you can have power with instead of power over.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes. I never had the words to say what you just said, but that power with instead of power over, because being a woman who is married with children, I kind of struggled with even making that decision, because I've been, conditioned in the same society that makes you seem almost like that you're weak because you're doing that, or you're not the strong Black woman, whatever that may be, someone who chose not to marry or not to have children will have. And so thank you for saying that, because it just reminds me that you can have like power. What did you say? Power with, right? Yes, power with, yes. With that femininity, because there's something about being able to just push a baby out your body that requires a lot of strength, or to talk to a man every day that sometimes you want to choke,
Listen, restraint takes power.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like I don't have, because we've only been shown power over, we feel like we're that competition thing, which is such a Western concept, right? It's like, I don't have to be in competition with you. I can be my own star and you can be your own star. It's a bunch of stars in the universe. Don't you see them all shining brightly, right? They all shine.
Yes, they do.
And that's, and no star is competing with the other star, because they all have their place. I am powerful because I was created with purpose. And as long as I'm living in my purpose, and as long as I'm, if I'm in a relationship with you, I can communicate with you my needs. And it's power in being able to say, listen, this is what I need, and I'm not settling for anything less. And there's power in you saying, you know what, I'm going to rise to the occasion. And also, this is what I need.
Exactly. I love
it. We can have power with each other.
Right. Power with. Girl, that is going to be my new mantra. Like, seriously. Well, let me just step into this real quickly, because we talked about this a little previously before we started. But what does that look like for Black women who are, independent and successful? But like you said, like, I have been cautious of being angry in the workforce. As if, because, the angry Black woman, that's different from just like the regular angry person. So how do we find, how do we, we still have to deal with all of the everyday stuff, but within the context in the society that is still very much racist.
Yeah.
How do we do that in a healthy way?
You know, it's interesting. That's what most of my research centers around. And it's important to know that I don't have a one-size-fits-all answer, right? It's about making the choices that work best for you. I can only tell you what I do and what works for me. And so I made a decision last year. I was so affected by the Breonna Taylor murder. And I realized, having decided to code switch much of my life, I realized that no matter how I wore my hair, no matter how many letters I had behind my name, no matter how many classes I taught, how much money I made, at the end of the day, your perceptions of me as a Black woman is how you're going to treat me. Right? And so since no matter what I do, you're going to treat me how you see me, I might as well be myself, right? And so I no longer care. I mean, I'm aware of that angry Black woman, right? That's what my research is about. I'm aware of the angry Black woman, the sexualized Black woman, the bitter Black woman, the educated, like all of those things. I'm aware of it.
Right.
And it's, for me, I found power in saying I'm aware of it and I'm choosing not to give into it. I'm choosing to say, you know what, if I'm angry, my anger is justified.
Anger. Yeah. It doesn't matter how other people.
It doesn't matter. And as a matter of fact, while we're talking about it, can we also talk about how what you did made me angry? In the first place.
Yes.
Let's talk about you.
Yes.
You know? And so what do I encourage Black women to do? I encourage Black women to not allow anyone to take their power away, to be foolproof, to be, 100% foolproof. And the rub is be okay with whatever consequences that brings, right? I'm okay with the consequences of being myself. I am not okay with the consequences of not being myself. That tears a piece of my soul away. I realized, like, every time I kept my mouth shut or I rephrased something so that it'd be more palatable to somebody else, what I'm doing is I'm saying my true self isn't worthy of being seen, right? And so I decided for myself, my life, right, that it's just better for me. I would prefer the consequences of me being myself than the consequences of the code switch. So.
Absolutely. Because like you said, at the end of the day, even if they see you that way, they're going to see you that way.
Period.
No matter how you respond.
Period.
That is a really good way of looking at it. That is a
period.
Really good way. I like that.
I've been teaching academia for how many years? And every year, some of my students call me angry in my evaluations.
Really?
And I'll give you an example. And I'm writing a book. I'm going to talk about this in my book. But I remember I was teaching an online class. So I didn't even have this face-to-face content. I was teaching an online class. And this one student wasn't doing nothing, waited to the end of the class to want to meet with me. Now I reached out to the student several times throughout the term, meet with the student, have the meeting, and the student at the end goes, oh, I just didn't expect you to be so nice.
Wow.
I wonder why. Like, what about me?
Yeah. Why would you not?
I reached out to you all term. Right. You know what I mean? Like it definitely wasn't my behavior, but it was because of your perception of what you saw in my picture, in my bio. Right. You know what I mean? You don't have any other interactions with me. And so that lets me know, like, oh, it's real. Like, even me not, before I even enter the room, people have already decided what they wanted to decide about me. So I'm just going to be myself.
I love that. I love that. Okay, I think I did ask you where you see Black families struggle, but what advice would you give at Promise Black children who grow up in households where there is addiction and violence and a lot of unhealthy sex, or sexual, relationships that are inappropriate? What would you tell a child in a situation like that? In terms of
yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I believe in always giving people an opportunity to correct, right? And so I think it's important for parents to encourage their children to be honest, and for children to try honesty first, right? And so I would love to see, and I've had some of my teens do the same, say parents like, Mom, when you do this, or Dad, when this happens, this is how I feel. I struggle to sleep at night because of this, and that, right? And so I understand that some people, some definitely teens, young people don't feel safe saying those things. And so I also encourage them to use their friend group, their peer group, as a support. If they have another adult they trust, whether that adult is at church or that adult is a coach or that adult is a counselor, always have a space for you to go. And then at the end of the day, if you feel like you don't have anybody, you have yourself. And so take pen to paper and write it out. But it is important to get it out, because what you don't talk out, you will act out. Right. And so it's important to have some type of outlet to be able to express that. I'm always going to advocate for counseling if that is an option. I don't know what the laws are everywhere, but I know in New Jersey, they passed a law a couple of years ago where teens don't even have to get their parents' permission to get therapy.
I didn't know that. Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
So
I don't think we have that here. I'm in North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. So
awesome. Okay. That's good to know. Are there any resources that you would encourage Black families to utilize to help improve their coping skills?
Sure. And it's so interesting. I'm going to be transparent. I wasn't even prepared with that. I should have brought some resources with me, but there are definitely some workbooks. I actually am a fan. I'm not 100% sold on DBT as a therapeutic technique, but I do love a lot of the DBT skills. Yeah. So DBT is dialectical.
Yes. I prefer the skills over the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So dialectical behavior therapy, those skills, so softness with self, that's something I think that we can even expand on as a Black people, right? Just how because we've been hardened, we're so hard. We're hard on our kids. We're hard on our mates. We're hard on ourselves. It's like, like the way we talk to ourselves, the internal dialogue, the way we communicate with one another, how we're always defensive, right? Because we've had to be. But checking that, right? Because we don't have to be that way 100% of the time. When I leave my house, I walk into the world and I walk into my work. Yes, I need to be guarded. I need to be protected. But when I FaceTime my mom, I don't have to have that up. I'm talking to I don't have to have that up. I don't have to bring that home to my partner, right? I can be honest about my day and be soft, right? And so I really I encourage people to look, and you can online, they have all that stuff for free. The DBT skills, I love. Softness with self is one of my favorite.
I love that.
DBT skills.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, because I think one of the problems that we have, and correct me if I'm wrong, because this is your territory, but well, I guess that's kind of what you're saying. We don't have that skill, because a lot of times, you take the Black woman into the workforce, softness with skill might not be as effective, Right. So maybe she's going to fall into the angry Black woman, but you've advised us to show up as yourself, irrespective of how they see you. So, but it'd be important to know then that we need to add that softness with self as we come home, to our children, or even if it's just ourself or, family, whatever.
Yeah. Right. Just make sure those social cues rules apply even with softness with self. Right. So I think about how, my mom used to always say, don't embarrass me, right? You know how to act. Right. And there's no standard way to act across the board, right? How I behave over my friend's house is different than how I behave at church. It's different than how I behave at the library. It's different than how I behave at movie theater, right? So the situation calls for a different set of behaviors, a different set of rules and norms. And so that same thing goes with how we're communicating, right? The way I'm communicating at work, that's a different setting. I don't have to be that way. When, like you said, when I'm home, I don't have to be that way with my children. I don't have to be that way with my friends. I have to be able to turn it off, right? And honestly, being able to step outside of that allows us to be nurtured, right? Allows us to get fed, allows people to see our vulnerability, so that then we're better equipped to handle those hard spaces that we find ourselves in.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything that you've read or listened to recently that you think our Black people can help to improve their cooking skills?
Yeah, I had it up here. I guess it must have fell down or do I have it here? Nope. So I just bought this book. It came out, I think, last year. It's called Re-Envisioning Therapy with Women of Color. It's a Black feminist healing perspective. So I recommend folks read their Black therapists working with Black people. I recommend that they read those so that we aren't confined by what the Western world tells us we need to do or what tells us is therapeutic, right? And so that would be my resource for like clinicians, absolutely. But then for families, I encourage them to start incorporating some soft time at home with their children. Particularly, I work primarily with adolescents, and they go from one environment where they're being berated to another environment where they don't feel good enough to another, right? And so they, at the very least, when they go home, they should be held. And I don't even just mean physically, but just held. You know what I mean? And so incorporating some regular soft time with your family.
I love that. And honestly, we sometimes, even me with a spouse, sometimes you feel like you don't have time to do that. Like it kind of falls off. And so it sounds like you're saying we need to be intentional.
Yes.
About making sure that we do that. Yeah. Yep. What is a common myth that you like to debunk about healthy coping skills?
A common myth that self-care is selfish.
Oh my God, say it again. Yes,
that is a myth. As Madame Audre Lorde said, self-care is an act of defiance, really. It's especially for Black women, right? They don't want us to care for ourselves, right? And so self-care is a right, not a privilege. And I needed to be able to do the work that I do to make it through the day. I better be caring for myself, right? Oh, it's also a myth that you have to take care of others before you take care of yourself, right? That's also a myth because you can't pour from an empty cup. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you, Dr. Ebony. So we're going to transition to a part of the show that's called What's Good. It's nice and simple. I give you a hypothetical situation, and you take what you have kind of shared with us today and give some insights into how you can use it.
Listen, I love a good game.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, here we go. So meet Bonnie. Bonnie is a 38-year-old Black woman with 2 children, ages 7 and 4. Bonnie has been in a marriage for 10 years and has followed all of the rules, got married, had the children, and was very committed to her husband. But she's recently learned that she is very unhappy and wants to leave. She struggles with making the decision to leave because she fears being judged by the members of her church. How would you advise Bonnie to proceed, and what type of coping skills do you have for her?
Oh, listen, that's I don't have enough time to go through that, right? That's a big situation. So I have questions. So I want to know, how Bonnie came to this realization, right? What's going on that she's unhappy? What's going on that's affecting her decision to leave? Like, what type of relationship is this? Is it just that it's a healthy relationship and she realized it's just not what she wants? Or is it an unhealthy relationship and that, has some other things going on in there? So I would, my first step would be to hear Bonnie's story and to ask a bunch of questions and see how I can best support her. And then, given what she says, probably a technique I would use is something I developed, but it's basically a pros and cons thing, right? And it's really rooted in CBT, but this whole if then what, right? So where she says, if I leave, I'm going to be judged by my church family. Okay, and so if they judge you, then what? Well, if they judge me, it means that blah, 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 blah. Okay, and so if that happens, then what? And go all the way to the end. And
I love that. And keep doing that until you don't have anything else. Okay.
Exactly. I keep going there because at the end of the day, typically people don't say I die or they kill me, right? It's not this thing. It's like, so it's really...
It's survivable.
Right, exactly. It's survivable. So, okay, how do you plan to survive it? And then I have them go the other way. So say they don't judge you. Then what, right? Because this is all based off her imagination. Right, her church family might be supportive, her church family might say, let's pray. Her church family might, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so we always think in worst case scenarios, but I do the scenario that she has first and go down the line. Mm-hmm. And then I offer the alternative. And either way, like you said, it's survivable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So to my clients who are hearing me, when you hear me do this technique, we are crediting Dr. Ebony, but I will be implementing that in my sessions. I love it.
Oh, absolutely.
Then what? Awesome. Well, Dr. Ebony, you have shared a wealth of information with us today. I am sure our listeners are going to want to find you and maybe see how to work with you. So can you give us some information about where, if someone's looking for a therapist in New Jersey or wherever you're practicing, or how they can, continue to be inspired by you?
Absolutely. And so if you're looking for a therapist, I actually have therapists who work with me as well. So you can go to my website. It's www.centerformarcus.org. Okay. So that's CENTERFORMARCUS.org. And you can actually look at the therapists. They're all Black therapists, and request an appointment. If you just want to learn more about me, you can go to my personal website, which is www.drebonywhite.com. And you can learn more about me and the things that I'm having going on, things where I'm speaking and all of that. Yeah. I'm
just going to put both of those links in the show notes. So for people who are listening, you'll just look on the page and just click and you'll find it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Is there anything else you have for our audience today, Dr. Ebony?
No, I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm so excited that you had me on here.
Absolutely. It's an honor. It's a pleasure. And thank you so much for sharing our healthy coping skills with our listeners.
Absolutely.
Take care.
You too.
All right. Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Black Marriage and Family Therapy Matters podcast, where we connect Black families to Black therapists. Since you've listened all the way through, come on in and join the family. If you haven't done so yet, please join our free community where we offer weekly trainings and monthly giveaways. We can be found on Facebook under the Black Marriage and Families Matter Facebook group. And since you're serious about joining our family, we also invite you to join our All In campaign, which signifies your commitment to go all in, not only for yourself, but in helping us reach more people by downloading this podcast wherever you are listening to it, leaving us a review, and subscribing to our YouTube channel. This really helps us reach more people and change more lives. After all, Dr. Martin Luther King once said, we can all get more done together than we can apart. With that said, I want to encourage you to share this episode with just 3 other people who you think might also benefit from our community and what we are offering, with the hopes that all of you can join our All In campaign. When you're done, simply click the link All In campaign in the bio and receive a free copy of my course entitled Goodbye Toxicity, which is valued at $297. This course will help you to work through some of the difficult experiences that arise in most of our relationships, and it's completely free to you with your commitment to join our All In campaign. We look forward to connecting with you every Monday and Wednesday. Thanks for listening.